nation, and in our community we have a clan system, so I was born for the Turtle Clan on my mother's side, and my Indian name is Tantangawambli. That name was given to me by the elders when I was given the responsibility to be the keeper of that sacred hoop that we take around the country. Last August 10th, I celebrated my 32 years of continuous sobriety. I have, that's a miracle. And I have 8 children, and I have 17 grandchildren. And all of my children are now sober. Through those years, we did a lot of family work, and I believe that our family has broken that cycle of addiction. It was in our family for generations. But my grandbabies, they have no idea about alcoholism, about violence, they're just kids, you know. So I know that the cycle can be done, because but it didn't happen in 90 days. It took a long time and a lot of honesty and a lot of ceremonies, a lot of talking circles, and a lot of fear, talking to one another, saying the truth. But it took a lot of years to heal that, but it's pretty cool now. I know we had Thanksgiving dinner, and my older kids, they were telling stories of when I was drinking. And the grandbabies, they wouldn't believe that they were talking about their grandpa. But I had to tell them, no, they're telling you the truth. That's the way the case worked. So I'm really honored to be here. I thought there was going to be more snow. I have a friend of mine who's working up in Spokane, and he was telling me there's, I don't know, 18 inches of snow, and everything was shut down. And he said, take your boots, and I bet your plane won't land. And I watched the Weather Channel, and they were doing snow warnings and everything else, so, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't too bad, so I always like coming here to Seattle. So, in a little over an hour, I'm going to tell you a story of what happened in 24 years. And it's almost like every day I'm still on my knees, and I thank the Creator and ask for another day of sobriety. I don't think I've missed a day since I've been sober. But every day I have to pinch myself that you can even believe I'm allowed to do this. I mean, it's just, you don't get old. And I remember Johnny Littencloud told me one time, he was my mentor and also my sponsor. And one time he told me, he was telling me about everyone is born for a purpose. There's no one, I don't care who you are, everyone has a purpose. You're born for one. Not only that, but you're given the talents and the gifts to implement that purpose. And he said, if you're ever lucky enough to find your purpose to life, he said, you'll never have to work again. And I didn't know till later on what that meant. So coming to here, to spend this time to do this isn't work. I would say I'm going to work. It's just really an honor to, to be in that type of fellowship, around the healing of our Native people. And so on this journey, White Bison, it actually, I don't tell us too much, but it was actually formed out of my first vision quest that I went on. And that's how White Bison was born. Johnny Littencloud took me on the hill. And the last day I had this vision of this White Bison come out of the ground, really white light. And he turned his head and looked at me and went back down in the ground, real slow. And so when he came up there, I was telling him what was going on, and he said, well, I'm going to interpret that for you. So he did his ceremony, and for quite a while it seemed like, and finally he said, what that means is you're being called to do something. He said if you was a Christian, that would have been an angel. But he said because of who you are, that took a shape that you'd be familiar with, so that you'd pay attention to it. And so he said, "You're being called to do something." And then he just turned and walked away. And I thought he knew what he was, you know. So I was running along the trail, and I said, "Well, what is it?" Because I've been out here 5 days, and I've got task lists, and my email's backed up, and I got all this stuff, you know, I need to know where to put it. And finally he got irritated at me. He says, "Come back to the house." So I went back to the house with him, and went in his backyard. He had some like ducks and chickens there. And so we got back there, and he says, "Sit down." And I sat down on this piece of wood, and he went in his shed and he bought a coffee can, and in there he had some corn to feed these ducks and chickens. And so he reached in that coffee can, he pulled out one piece of corn, and he just threw it over on the ground like that. And so we sat there a couple of minutes, and I said, "Well, what's going on?" "Shut up." He said, "You're always talking. You're always talking. Your mouth is always going." He said, "Just sit there, be quiet." So I must have sat there, it seemed like a long time, and finally one of those ducks noticed that corn, and it waddled over there and it ate that corn. And then he said, "Now it's starting to happen." And so that duck came back, and so he reached in, he got another piece of corn, but he threw it further this time. And he sat there a long time, and finally that duck went over and ate that corn. And it wasn't very long, you'd see a duck would be looking around to see if there's any of that corn around there. And finally he said, "This is why I can't tell you what you're being called to do." But he said, "Just like me and that duck," he said, "the Creator in you is going to give you little signs, little hints, little things, and then He'll lead you right into what He wants you to do." And so that's exactly what happened. That's why he couldn't tell me what it was. And this is what it was. And I'm still looking for that darn corn, because it doesn't quit once you find that rhythm. And so our organization, White Bison, is started in 1988. And the IWRI movement actually didn't kick off until 1998. So the elders had us do almost 10 years of ceremonies. Certain things had to happen before everything could get going. So we had to do a ceremony with the blacks and the yellows, and big ceremonies, 8-day ceremonies we had to do with them. Then we had the power to go ahead and to do what we're doing. And so what we have found is each community has to use their own culture. That's what works the best. You can't like borrow too much. You have to use your own culture. That's what seems to work the most as we've done this program. In 1991, I had just finished a year's worth of work in the community, going out to this community every month. There were about 4,000 tribal members in this. It was a remote village, 2 settlements. And we had a HUD grant. So I went up there and I worked with them a year. We'd done an assessment. They had about 85% alcoholism above the age of 12. They only had 1 youth graduated from high school. The average lifespan in this tribe was 37.6 years, which is a lot of death of young people. The sexual abuse was there. We found later on, a couple years later, we found that 80% of the women in that community had been sexually abused. Very, very high sexual abuse was going on in that community. Elderly abuse, incest, all of those things was going on. And at the end of the year, we had evaluations and things on how grants are, and they looked really good. But I knew at the end of the year, I knew we hadn't changed anything. Nothing had changed. So I was going to quit. I said, I got into the wrong work. I can't do this. So I was going to talk to Johnny Lippencloud, and he said, before you do, he said, I want you to bring together 40 elders from throughout the United States. so we were able to do that at a very remote camp in Colorado. And so there was like Austin Two Moons, Thomas Bianca, Warren Lyons, we had the Clan Mothers. Many of them were there. And so we explained to them about this community. And I had a belief that it was in a downward spiral and you couldn't pull it out. There was too much going on for too long. The council was drinking. There was all that politics was going on inside the community. And I personally believed it couldn't change. But when we got done and explained to these elders, they said no, they said it can change. So they went on and they said there are two states of mind that you can be in as a human being. And one, they called it the state of I don't know what I don't know. Now if you think about that, like if you don't know what you don't know, then you could be doing what you think is right, and you can end up, it's not good. Like you ever fall in love with the wrong person? Kind of like that. You don't know what you don't know, and all of a sudden something happens and then you know what you don't know. Duh, what was I doing there with that sickle? So they said, we're going to give you some information that will help you move from I don't know what I don't know to now I know what I don't know. So they said, where were you looking for the information? Of course I said, Google. And they said, oh, no wonder. They said, what you need to know is not on Google, but we're going to tell you where it is. Where the information is that you need to know that can take a community with those types of issues and you can turn that community around. It can be turned around. So what they told us, they said, you go back to the community and you gather the elders. That in those elders, if you ask, what did your parents tell you? What did your grandma and grandmas? What did your great-grandmas tell you? You can go back into time, 100, 200 years, all the way back. And when it was back there, it wasn't like it is now. They remembered a time of how things were organized, how they were run, stories that were told, things that existed. And so that's what we did. We started going back to the old people, the elders, and started asking them to tell us about the community and how it was a long time ago. And so, oh, I took somebody else's. So this time I want to tell you about is a long time ago. This was before the coming of the Lightskins. When our people started living in community, at first they didn't get along. But then they started to watch nature. And they started to see there were cycles, there were seasons. And they watched the animals, how they treated their young. They started to watch and they began to observe that there was an intelligence system there. So they didn't call plants weeds. They didn't use words like that. Or they didn't call animals pests because they saw something else. Every bee was worthwhile. And it became so knowledgeable about how this interconnected system worked. In some communities, they would even refer to those entities as relatives, as nations. They would call them just like they were their own. They saw that they were a part of something. And so they began to observe that there's a world you could see and there's a world you could not see, the spiritual world. And that there was, even though you could not see it, it's very, very powerful, very dependable. And so they called them laws, natural laws, spiritual laws, and those values. And they were very knowledgeable about that world in which the people lived. So the ones by the ocean, then all those entities, the whales, etc., it taught them how to be in harmony with things. Of course, the ones in the desert taught them how to be in harmony with things. So both were different, they had different songs, different ceremonies, but they all knew how to be in harmony with the earth and how it taught them. So in other words, you couldn't go write a grant with, say, the ocean people in the east, and say you did a study and you found out the whale ceremonies are really effective, and you write up a grant, and then you take that grant, you take it over to the Hopis, you know, out there in Arizona, and you say, hey, we got something really going to help you. What you got to do is you got to do the whale ceremonies. And of course they're going to say, well, what the hell is a whale? Well, we got technical assistance for you. You just don't worry, we're going to train you on whale things. Well, we know that doesn't work. So that's why each one has to do it, you see, in their own way. But they were very, very knowledgeable about this world. So then this is the system that they live by. At the root level, they had the teachings, the earth, the spirituality, the elders, the ceremonies. That was at the root of everything in the spiritual world. So then they would take the little baby boys and they'd say, we're going to show you how to become a man. They knew how to do that. Very, very knowledgeable about the cycle of life. And they took the little girls and they said, we're going to show you how to become a woman. Then they took the woman and they said, now you're not done yet. Now you have to become an elder. And to the men, you have to become an elder. Then the elders had a job. So their job was to be available. We didn't put them in old people's homes. They was the most significant, important now. Because they had the knowledge. That's who he went to. Now those elders, where did they get it from? Well, they got it from their elders. That's why it's so powerful. Somebody will say, well, how do you know that? That's what the elder told me. Oh, okay. You back off. Is this like church people? How do you know that? Bible says. Whoa, okay. So you back off. So as soon as you say, this is what the elders said, everybody shuts up. Because that was how the system was, you see, a long time ago. So during these days, when it was like this, we did not have domestic violence. We did not have sexual abuse. We didn't have incest. Our kids were not committing suicide. The men stayed with the families. There was a system that was intact. There were problems. It wasn't problem-free, but like in ours, we had the peacemakers. So you go to the peacemaker, and they knew the ceremonies because they watched nature, how they solved and resolved conflict. So they knew how to do that. Actually, during these days, there wasn't even a hell. This was before we learned about hell. But there was a time we didn't have a hell. To my knowledge, there's no native word, because I ask a lot, in the years I've been going around, do you have a word for hell? No, we don't have no word for hell. So you couldn't tell somebody to go to hell. Because there wasn't one. Now, we didn't learn about hell till later on. Now, we've been in hell ever since. But there was a time there wasn't one. It didn't exist for us. Wouldn't it be cool to live that way? Many of you would not even have jobs. That would change your career. We wouldn't need counselors, mental health. We wouldn't need any of those jobs because they already existed in the community to the degree that they needed them. So this world, this was the source of our culture. So instead of looking at Google, we had to go back to the elders and use that Indian Google. Go back inside and start to get the information from them and then pull that information back out. And when we started to do that, things changed. Things started to work. But something happened. Something that took our communities from this, and in a very short time, this is how our communities are now. Many of us would recognize the alcoholism, the violence, the sexual abuse. We'd recognize this now. Now we all have jobs, because this one here produces jobs. There's something that happened, changed how it was for us. Not only that, but these are some more problems that came as a result of this thing that happened to us. It's actually funded by the United States government. It was funded by Congress. You recognize this one? Single parents, absentee dads, or you take a look at the men, I'll call it grandpas, grandmas, where are the guys? Single moms, they're raising kids alone, you see, etc. This thing that happened to us, it was funded purposefully with a strategy to destroy our nations, to destroy our community, to destroy the family structure, and to destroy the individuals. I'm talking about the United States government. This is who it's funded by. Its intent was to destroy the family structure. So, how was this done? When we were in harmony with the earth, and we knew the seen world and we knew the unseen world, what they knew was we had power. We had power. We knew a lot. So they said, we're going to take away the spirituality, that part that you cannot see. And when we do that, instead of being in harmony, it'll knock them out of harmony, out of balance. They won't have that knowledge, and they'll be mixed up. And when they're mixed up, then we can take the land, whatever we want, we can rule them. All we're going to do is get them mixed up by taking away the spirituality. And so how is this done? So I'm going to show you a very short video. It's a documentary. We made a journey to a 7,000-mile journey to 25 boarding schools. And we videotaped 183 hours worth of video from the elders who told us the story of what happened to them in those schools when they were little kids. So I just want to show you a trailer of this video. Some of you may know Horace Axtell. He's on our council of elders. Sometimes we hide that part of it. It took us almost a year and a half to edit that 183 hours, but on March 3rd we're going to be releasing this documentary. It's very, very powerful, and we're going to release it worldwide. We're going to put it on YouTube and distribute it that way. It'll be on our website, and for those who don't have those tools, if you want, we will send you a free copy of it, a DVD. If you just go to the White Bison website and you just type in info at whitebison.org, and you put your address in there because we need a place, to mail it. But we think that this has been a secret of the United States government for a very, very long time. It's not taught in history. No one talks about it. People don't believe it. But it's time that this story is told. And so this is one of the steps that we're taking to do this. So if any of you want just a copy of it, it's a matter of an email, an address, and we'll send it to you. And on the very beginning of that documentary, when you get it, it says Indian copyright. To be copied, borrowed, sold, stolen, pawned, whatever it is. But it's to use that, we do that anyway, right? It's just not like a big deal. But it's to take that and to pass it on. It's to show it to the children, show it to the people, get the dialogue going. We're also hoping there that we know there's a lot of stories in our communities that are not told. As some of you are able to, like my friend Lonnie, are able to record stories, then send them to us, and we're making 2 more documentaries. One is the story of the elders, and the last one is going to be on recovery, healing, and forgiveness, which we'll talk about here in a bit. So this historical trauma, thanks to Dr. Maria Braveheart and Bonnie Duran was involved, and many of those, they started to do some research that pertain exactly about us and what was going on. And they're the ones that surfaced this enough so those of us who were in the field could start to tie what is going on in our native communities. So this historical trauma is a combination of immense losses, traumatic events that are perpetrated upon an entire culture. It happened in Canada, it happened in Alaska, all over this cultural assault went on. And these losses include the loss of culture. It was designed and funded to take away the very thing that was keeping us in harmony. It was to take away the language. I was doing a training in Minneapolis, must be a couple of years ago now, and we had a circle going, and there was a young girl in there, probably in her early 20s or so. She was telling us that a story. She lived with her grandma. Her parents were alcoholics, and so grandma was raising her. And she said she was 5 or 6 or so. Anyway, she came home from school, and grandma was cooking, and she ran up there and says, "Grandma, Grandma, I learned a new word." She was so excited. Grandma turned around and she said, "Oh, what did you learn?" And she spoke a word of Ojibwe. And her grandma turned around and she said she grabbed me by the shoulders and she shook me like this and she slapped me right across the face. And she said to her, "Don't you ever speak that word in here again. Never, never, never." And so they never ever talked about it, but it just happened to come up. Well, as the feather ran around the circle, grandma happened to be there. And this grandma, she's pretty old. You ever see an elder who has wrinkles under wrinkles? Beautiful. I mean, you want to take their pictures and put them on a calendar. That's how beautiful she was. And so when she got that feather, you could tell something was going to happen because the room got immediately quiet. And so she said, "I'm going to tell something." She said, I vowed I would never tell nobody, but I'm going to tell now. She said, "When I was a little girl," she said, "one morning the Indian agent came over, the wagons were out there, some kids were in there, and they told my mom and dad it's time." And so they got in the wagon, they went to the boarding school, and the only language she ever knew, ever heard was just her own language when she was little. She didn't know anything else. So she was there a couple of days, and she said, "I was speaking to one of my friends at that school, and the teacher came over, and she said, 'Come with me.' And she took her in the other room and set her down on the table. She said, I sat for a while. She said, this man came in there. She said, I never saw him before. No one had said anything. And he took my hand, and he put it on the table, and he pulled out a butcher knife, and he chopped my little finger off. And she said, nobody said anything what was going on. And she said, I just cried. She said, that night, she said, I just wanted my mom. That's why I wanted my mom. I wanted to go home. I didn't want to be there. I was scared. And so they bandaged it up, and she said a couple days later she was talking to her friend again, and the teacher come over and says, come with me. She said, this time I knew what they was going to do. And she said, I fought. And she said, they took me in there. He come in, they held my hand down, and he chopped another finger off, the second finger. Now the grandma's crying, big tears coming down, you know, and she looked at her granddaughter, and she says, granddaughter, that's why I only have 2 fingers left on my hand. She said, I learned on that 3rd one, don't ever speak that language. And she said, when I heard you speak it, something inside, she said, terrified me. And I didn't want to hurt you, but I did that to make you not ever speak that word again. She says, it came from somewhere, and I'm really sorry. Do you think that's a true story? It is. It's true. I have a videotape of a grandma in Arizona who had 5 fingers chopped off. These things that happen to these little kids, unbelievable. Halfway through that journey, there were 5 of us in the core team that made that journey. We had to call in the elders for help. You couldn't take it anymore. It was like when we went to Chamawa, it was like a perpetrator was there. And all these little kids come forward and they told on them. They said, this is what he did to me. A sick, sick, sick person. Then we drive in a car, go to the next boarding school, Warm Springs. The perpetrator was there too. He did it to them. Then we drive to Fort Hall. He was there too. Did the same thing. They had jails. We have pictures of the jails. The things that was allowed to happen to these kids was unbelievable that it happened here in the United States. So its goal was to take these things away. The way of life, the religion, and to destroy the family structure. In Carlisle is where it started. Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And from there, they built a system of over 500 schools. There actually was more, because in 1934, the government started funding the churches to continue the boarding school process. So it expanded out into a whole different arena on these churches. Could you imagine being in your village or at home and one day the military would come and take all your kids? Can you imagine it? How that night would be, how that next morning would be, and there's no place to call, there's no place to go. It just happened. You see, they just took them. Because see, we had this system here in place, and so all they needed to do was to break that cycle and take the kids away. In fact, Carlisle, the very first class that Carlisle had, they took the leaders, the children of the leaders. That's who was in Carlisle for the most part in the very first ones. Because you see, if I have your children, I have you. Yeah, so as part, you see, in a sense, of military strategy. So as they took the children and they put them in these schools, then what they said, we will teach them. And so in those schools, what happened here?
Oh, touch the, it went into sleep mode. Touch on the screen, the thing you use to move the mouse pad on the computer. Where's our tech guy?
He's on it. He's on it. He's coming.
Okay. Hey, be careful.
I think I... Heard of them, 500 plus, because they started to take these children into the schools. And instead of teaching them what we would have taught them, they actually did the opposite. They made sure they did not learn the knowledge of what we would have taught them. They taught them because the goal was to assimilate. I actually have a document of a hearing in the Senate. There was how the boarding schools got funded. They did a study. One of the studies was, what would the cost, hey, thanks. Correct. What would be the cost, what would it cost the United States government to exterminate the Indian? That was one study. And it was discussed in a hearing. The second one, and what would the cost be to assimilate? They knew how long it would take, how many millions of dollars it would be, and the choice was the boarding schools because it cost less money to assimilate than it did to exterminate. But there literally was a plan for extermination that was discussed in Congress in the hearing. I have the document, and I took it to make sure it wasn't fake, because I couldn't believe that would be going on, you see, in our government. So instead of these kids learning what we would have taught them, what happened was they got no knowledge of ceremonies, no knowledge of language. That was all taken away, the elders' teachings, and instead, that's where the beatings, that's what they started to experience, was the beatings. They had gauntlets, where if a kid did something wrong, they would make him run or her run through the other kids, and if they didn't hurt them hard enough, they had to run through it themselves. So they learned one-on-one violence. They learned to hurt each other. Even though they didn't want to, they learned to do that. Take away the language, no teachings, the sexual abuse, soap in the mouth if they spoke the language, cutting their hair. Now these little kids were going to grow up and come back home. And when they come back home, here's where we started to see the presence of alcoholism. Escape from the pain. This is where we started to see the violence. And the violence is continued today in our communities, and the sexual abuse, the boarding schools, the mission schools, and residential schools. So can you see where it started to be handed down generation to generation? You're going to have a tendency to parent how you were parented. I remember my first inventory and recovery. I made a vow when I was probably my teenagers. I said, I don't know how I'm going to turn out, but I will never be like my dad. I don't care how it... Guess what? I turned out just like him. I just hated it that I was honest enough to own. I just kind of did what he did and passed it on. It was hard to admit it because I made that vow not to be that. So this is what we're passed on generation to generation. One generation. So this is a cycle that we must break. So this is something that's probably the easiest understood by Native people or people who have been around natives long enough to understand the thought. Our people used to call it the ancestors within. So those generations, if they got hurt, they got beat, they got punished, and they did not heal, then do you think it ended up in your grandmas, in your parents, now you? Do you think you are carrying around those hurts of those ones before you, but you may not know why you are carrying that around? The ancestors within. See, we know that. Now try to write a grant for that one. Very, very hard to write a grant to talk about those ancestors within. So when we go for this healing, part of our healing is we have to heal those ancestors within so they can be free. So they can let go of that hurt. And so how that plays out in our communities over the generations, this intergenerational trauma is very, very deep. It's deep in our psyche now. And not only that, the way that it works is it doesn't surface right away. Like when we process death, there's all kind of ideas about death. There's Kubler-Ross's, the 5 stages, 9 stages, whatever. But they say there's a stage of grieving that you go through. Different tribes do it differently. Some say you can grieve for 4 days, that's it. Some say a year, and there's all different ways that we do it. But the way it works when the assault is on a community is it doesn't surface till 3 or 4 generations later. The first 2 generations don't deal with it. It lays dormant. And so it lays dormant within our communities. Then all of a sudden, can you see this intergenerational trauma is tied to sexual abuse? Do you see where it came from? It was handed down, and now you see it. Do you think it's tied to the abusers? Do you think it's tied to violence? I'm talking about what's going on today. Is it connected to the trauma of the boarding school era?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is. And so it's connected to our relationships behind alcoholism. How it's playing out, though, now in our communities is you're seeing it in suicides. I'm going to a community next month. They had 100 documented teenage suicide attempts in 6 months. 43 completions. Can you picture that? In 6 months? The community is numb. Their eyes are dead. No one cries. Not no one. But you don't see grieving going on for that. Just cross your fingers and hope it's not yours is next. It's like that. And so it's playing out in our communities. You ever notice, like in our... Fool's Crow said one time, the 2 greatest enemies we have in our camps, number 1 enemy is alcohol, and number 2 enemy is jealousy. This thing that we do to one another in our organizations and in our tribes, and what we say and the rumors and the gossip and passing things on, you don't even know if they're true. Hurtful, terrible things we do to each other. And that's just normal. It's politics or whatever. No, it's sick. That's what it is. It's really sick. We never used to do that, you see, to each other. So this historical trauma, often it doesn't surface for 2 or 3 generations. So let's just say you're going to college now, and you're getting your degree in counseling or whatever, and you come to work in one of our Native communities, you go, what in the heck is going on here? Where did this come from? How did it start? How come there's so much? Every community I've been in so far that we have done intensive work, we always find that there's been at least 80% of the women have been sexually abused. Line up 10 women, 8 of them have been sexually abused. That's normal. It should be a crisis. It should be something's really wrong with that. When I was 10 and 11, I was sexually abused by an uncle. Went on for 3 years. Then there's a big beer party on our res one night. Big fight broke out and somebody killed him. Shot him 6 times. And I remember when I heard it how happy I was. I was happy. But that was my mother's most favorite brother. And when I saw, she was never the same after he died. And for years I carried a type of a weird feeling inside of myself, feeling happy over something my mother was so sad about. Can you get the idea of that? Sexual abuse paralyzes you. It screws you up. It's connected to failed relationships and taking risks. And I get in a committed relationship and I'd have a plan how to get out of it. Ain't that sick? I always did. I always had plan B. I knew exactly how to get the hell out of that one if I had to. And I didn't know how to not do that. They say, you committed? You bet you, baby, I'm committed. She says, you sure? She picked up on it that I had a plan B. And I knew it. I was a wall builder. I get messages. Come on, nope. Come on. I drive people nuts. Come on, nope. Come on, nope. Come on, nope. Drive them away. Didn't even know how come. Until I started to understand our family's role and what happened to us as a result of the boarding school that was on our reservation. Then I started to understand some things. So the system is still in place. There's not the culture there, but the system is in place. It still goes from whatever is at the roots to the kids, to the adults. It just still goes. And so can you see why our kids are turning out just like us, even though you don't want them to be like that? Now you can also see what's happening to many of our children. Many of our teenage children are going to prisons. They have prisons for Native kids. Teenagers I'm talking about.
It's called Chamawa.
Called Chamawa. There's some other ones. I went in this one in Montana. There were 100 Native kids in there. The youngest one was 11 years old. Something's really wrong when you got an 11-year-old Indian kid in prison, put there by the court. Something's really, really wrong. And they have them for girls. Of course, many of our kids are going to treatment, involved in the court system, all over the place. And unfortunately, too many of our kids are going to heaven. Teen suicides, car accidents. You're not supposed to go to heaven, have a plan to go to heaven to your old person like me. Then you better say, okay, you better get a will. You better make the plan because, you're at that age. But the young ones, they shouldn't have no dang plan for that. But our kids are going there in large numbers. So I want to just show this very short video and then to kind of tie all of this together.
Together and fill the sky. Don't know how to talk to you, just know how to say
That's how that works. The world in which our children live, our children did not create that world. We adults created that world for them. Then when it goes bad, we turn around, we call them high-risk youth, and what's the matter with them? I think the day will come when we get healthy enough, we're going to have a ceremony, we're going to call our kids together, and we're going to make an apology. We're going to say, I'm sorry what we did to you. That was wrong what we did to you. So this system that we have in one place, we were masters at raising children. We have parenting classes. We knew how to do it. This is like the cycle of life. This is what we knew. The universe, it has the natural law for everything to grow how it's supposed to grow. So the human being, as we go around the cycle of life, we grow by a 4-year cycle. The first year is like a spring, second year is like a summer, third year like a fall, fourth year like a winter. That's our cycle. So when a little baby is born, we knew a long time ago during this first season, we knew exactly what they were supposed to learn. Even when you're very, very young, your brain is even designed to learn language. Then the cells go away, and then it's hard to learn. They say during that time you have those brain cells, you can learn 5 languages easy as 1. That's what they say. But then it goes away. But it's got to happen at a certain time in the development of the human being. So we know about the ceremonies. We knew exactly what to do. Then the next, up to 8 years old, we knew exactly what to do. Then we knew exactly what to do. 12 years old, time for puberty ceremonies. We knew exactly what to do. And it was always to do with the earth. The first attachment was to the mom. So we built on making relationships. They say, when that mom hears that cry of her baby, her milk flows. That's attachment. Then the next one's supposed to go to the dad. The next attachment is coming from the family. The next one comes to the auntie and uncles, the extended family. The next one from the clan. The next one's from the tribe. And the last one, now go out and do your vision quest. Go out and learn your relatives out on the earth. That's why we never had attachment disorders. Because we knew how to attach and what it attached to. It was a spiritual power, you see, that we used to attach. So when you had certain ceremonies, like you belonged to a clan, you never had abandonment issues. Or the power of your naming ceremony is very important to have your Indian name. That isn't like gotten out of a book, it's gotten out of prayer. To give you your Indian name, then that name guides you. Like my daughter Kateri, some of you know her. Her name means one does good deeds for another. That's what her name means. And that's exactly what she's doing. She just goes around helping others. But that's like her name. She's a teenager. She got off track. I didn't worry because I knew her name was guiding her. I knew what she was coming back to. She couldn't be selfish. She couldn't be nothing except what her name is. Very, very important. So all the way around the cycle of life, we knew all the ceremonies. We knew the ways to do that. Now we're raising our kids like this. Now, the kid still has the universe is responding. It's born the first 4 years. It says, teach me this. So we're supposed to be in there teaching him that. And what happens is we don't. Then, even though you don't, the next season comes along and it says, teach them this. And what happens? We don't. Teach them this. And we don't teach them. Teach them this. And we don't teach them. Then they get to be teenagers and you say, I don't know what's the matter with these dang kids. They got no identity. That's what the heck it is. They just got no identity. Duh. That's true. Because we never taught them what it is to be. The ceremonies, the rites of passage, the rituals, or whatever it is you see that we call them. So we're passing this down generation to generation. And it's not going to quit until somebody goes, duh, we got to make it quit. We got to quit waiting for the government. Hell, they ain't coming. BIA ain't going to do it. IHS is too busy. There's nobody thinking about what we're thinking about. If we don't do it ourselves, it ain't going to get done. It's sort of like that. We got to do it. So this descendants of the boarding school. When we met with these elders in 1991, that was a life-changing experience for me to sit for 4 days with those elders and heard what I heard during those 4 days. But I have heard it said, more powerful than a march of mighty armies, more powerful than that is an idea whose time is come. Because what the elders said was, the universe is designed for balance, polarity, harmony. So it's trying to establish. What happened to us when we went out of harmony? Death, destruction, went out of harmony. And they say it can only go on for so long, then the natural law says it's enough. And so these other forces, and how we experience it, we say, something's going on in our communities. I can't figure out what the heck it is. So you sense something's going on, but you can't figure it out because nobody's doing it for sure. But some of you pick up on this. Something's going on. But the natural laws are coming back. And what the elders called that was a healing time. They told about this time was going to come, that a healing time would come. And so at this gathering in 1991 was the first time I had heard of that. They said there's a healing time. It's going to come. How do we know? The old people told us about it in the prophecies. They told about a time was going to happen. So I said to them, I guess about that third day, I said, well, sure don't look like a healing time to me. Like, how do we know it? Because it was kind of cool what they were saying, but I couldn't really see that it was a healing time at this gathering. So what they told us, they said a long time ago, the Creator came to Turtle Island, and He said to the people, I'm going to divide you into 4 directions, red, yellow, black, and white. And to each of the directions, I'm going to give you some teachings, they call original teachings. So to the red direction, He said, you are going to give the teachings about the earth, about the land, about the plants, about the animals. The Mother Earth is going to teach you those teachings. And to the yellow people, He said, you are to learn about the air, the breath, the breathing, meditation. So they went off and they learned that original teachings. The black, they got the water, and the white got the fire. And He says you're to go through the cycles of time. And the day will come when a healing time happens. In all 4 directions, you will come back and you will sit in a circle. The red, the yellow, the black, and the white. And while you are going off, what you start to, somebody will teach you that the Creator made 4 races. But when you come sit in a circle, you will have this, that there wasn't 4 races created, there was only one. That's the human race. And they said that when we are in the womb, that is the place where the Creator gives to each one of us our earth suit. So you come out of the room, womb, got your suit. You walk around, and you got your suit. Like, wouldn't it be really cool, like, if you have a gathering like this, you could go to another room, you unzip your earth suit, and you peel out of that thing, you know, and come here. You gotta be so cool, you don't have to be careful or nothing. You don't be no rules like, don't say the N word, and don't say this word, and don't say that word. You just say what the hell you want. No one would be. But they said what you got to realize is that the other 3 have teachings that we need. We, the red direction, cannot heal without the knowledge of the yellow, the black, and the white. They know something we don't know. And we know something they don't know. So we have to start sharing this knowledge. And they said that you sit in this circle, you start to look past your earth suit. I look right past your suit, and I look right in there, and I see, you love your kids just like mine. We will get over our, well, I'm Lakota, well, I'm a Hopi, well, I'm a, whatever this division is amongst ourselves. That's a part of the whole boarding school relocation. Native people, for the most part, we carry a damn card that tells you what % you are. The only other ones I ever knew had anything close to that was the Jews. They carried identification cards and we carried them. But then it was used, you know, part of the fort and distribution system. Well, what % are you? Well, I'm 1/4. Well, I'm full. I'm better than you. Whatever.
Yeah.
That whole crap about all of that, what does that mean anyway? That's actually was a part of how the boarding school discipline, it was a favoritism thing. You see, that was done in there. And so what they told us is, this first elder, I remember this one, he said, this is how you know there's a healing time. He said, the old people told us that someday an eagle was going to land on the moon. And when an eagle landed on the moon, shortly afterwards, it'd be a healing time. I was working for NASA, I worked for NASA in Apollo 6 through Apollo 13. And I knew they put eagle feathers on that lunar module. And so what happened is, those feathers, they went up, they circled the moon, and the first words ever spoken from the moon, it said, the eagle has landed. Could you imagine sitting in the living room and grandpa and your grandson, you're eating pizza or whatever, and you're watching this thing come down, you know, and all of a sudden it hits the moon dust, and all of a sudden you hear these words, the eagle has landed. I bet your grandpa would say, I told you. Listen to me. In another community, what they said was, they said that a spider would build a web around the earth. And it would build them all around the earth, it'd go around and around and build that web. And then they said when it was done, they said a woman would come forth, she'd speak on that web, and all nations would hear her voice. The internet. That wire that goes all the way around. And they said the reason the woman spoke was because we're out of balance in male thought. Many of our tribes a long time ago were matriarchal. They had clan mothers. You never hear no clan daddy, right? You got a Mother Earth, is there a Daddy Earth? No. No, there isn't. Because the design of it is, it has to come back and be in balance. We're too far out, and that's one of the reasons that we're in trouble. And they said the women have to come forth and lead. In 1991, when we heard this, there's 572 federally recognized tribes. 7 of those tribes are run by women. You come into the prophecy, the fulfillment of this. 1 year later, it went to 53. Bam! Tribal chair women. A year later, 93. That's not bad. This isn't about diversity or none of that stuff. It's about coming back the way it was a long time ago. And we men have to support this. We have to support this change that is taking place. And I'm not saying every woman that is in a place of leadership is cool. Some of them are jerks too, just like some of the men are jerks. But I know men who have the feminine side. And maybe we got to pay attention, you see, to those types of things. But we got to wake up and start watching this thing on balance. Another thing what they said is you're going to see young people with old spirits.
Yeah.
See, some of you already know what I'm talking about. Some of you in here, you're those young people, and you've got that old spirit. Maybe even since you were little, you always felt different. You felt like you're supposed to be doing something. That's what you felt, like a calling. Well, you pay attention because that's really real. You may not know what you're doing, but you just hang on because that's some of that corn. You're following that corn too. You don't know what it is, see, you'll be doing next. Another thing they told us, it says when the sun gets blocked in the 7th moon, right after that, the healing time is going to come. 1991, the last week of July was a major solar eclipse. We met with these elders 1 week after. So in that tribe, they said it's time. The earth darkened. Now we know that it's there. Another community, what they said is they said pretty soon a white buffalo calf is going to be born. And that calf is going to turn 4 colors. Red, yellow, black, and white. That calf was born in Janesville, Wisconsin. If you look on Google, you type in miracle, they took pictures of it and you can see the 4 colors that calf turned. When this was going on, I was a little bit in my sobriety. I was just trying to keep my damn res car going and keep a good roll of duct tape and, you know, repair things with my kids and paying bills, and that's where my life was. And then what happened was, I was instructed to build a hoop of 100 eagle feathers. And so, after the hoop was done, we used to take it up by the white buffalo calf, and we were to invite the elders from the 4 directions. So we brought elders from Africa, from Tibet, from Finland, the Sami people, and we had 27 of our own indigenous people at this gathering. And so the hoop looks like this for those who have not seen it. The center feather is a condor feather. When we were doing this ceremony up by the white buffalo calf, they sent a runner from Peru. And he said, you need to come down to Peru. Bring some eagle feathers. We're going to exchange the condor and eagle feathers, because he said in their ways, when the eagle and the condor meet, the healing was going to take place. So we sent an elder down there, 30 days, used a Shoshone, and they brought back the condor feather. Now that's the center feather of the hoop. You see the grounding feather. So then they put 4 powers in this hoop. When they started to do that ceremony, the white buffalo calf, it was laying down, but when the ceremony started, they got up, stood by the fence, and they stood right there and they watched everything that was going on. So they said there's 4 powers that we're going to need for this healing time, to heal from the intergenerational trauma. There's 4 things we need. First one, they said we got to forgive. Even forgive the unforgivable. The second one got up there from the other direction, and they said unity. We got to work together. Third was healing. Each one of us must heal ourselves. And they put these powers in this hoop. The 4th was hope. That hoop is very, very powerful. For those of you who have seen it, I've seen it heal. I've seen it do it. I don't have those powers. I just take good care of it. And then when people ask for it to come, then I take it. So when that was done, they said, you need to take this hoop to the communities. This is their hoop. I was made the keeper of your hoop. It isn't mine, that's your hoop. And so we made, from 1999 to 2003, we made 4 journeys. One, the Northern Path, and then we made one from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. That one, the elders made us run. We had to walk 4,294 miles, took us 109 days. Stopping into communities, talking about the prophecies, and there's a healing time, and telling the stories. What happened all of a sudden is like people were starting to get excited, because somehow inside of themselves they knew that this was true, that there was something was going on. And I remember I asked the elders, because the first journey we made in a powwow van. We went to communities, but you do a little Diet Coke or whatever. And it was really cool. But the last one we had to run. 25 of us was on that journey. And I asked them how come, and they said, when the Europeans came, they came from the east to the west. And behind them, the web of life died. They didn't respect the water, didn't respect the trees, cut everything down, and the web of life died. So they're waiting for the healing time, so they said the hoop had to go in the footprints the other way. And that behind the hoop, the web of life would come alive. That we'd all start to connect with each other like it was in the old days. Those feelings, that sense, you see, would start to come back. So as we found out what happened across the United States, these little circles, people like you guys are doing in a prison, these little circles, like Janine, what you're doing there, these little circles started to form up. People seem like, I'm going to do something. I don't care. With or without permission of a council. They say, we're going to do something. And so we started to see these people identify themselves working under extreme conditions. People making fun of them, sabotaging them, all sorts of things. Even non-natives in the communities were included. The healers come in 4 directions. You see red, yellow, black, and white. So since 1999, the hoop has traveled over 86,000 miles to the communities. That's a lot of miles. And that hoop, it can't fly. You have to take it in a car. You have to drive it. Because you wouldn't ship your baby in freight. you know, you wouldn't do that. So you got to take really good care of it, and some things that you got to do. So a web in our native community is starting to get reestablished across the country. So then once those started, then from those you'd see a web would get built, like in Minnesota. A web would get built. So you started to see the communities expanding and touching out to other places in the community. And so just like how they told us that web, you see that it would get built. So what we call this thing was a well-briety movement. Not a sobriety movement, well-briety movement. See, let's just say you're a jerk and you're drinking. Then let's just say you just quit drinking.
Still a jerk.
But you're sober. But you're still a jerk. And so who wants to hang with a sober jerk? No one. So see, the name is very important. The name has a spirit. You've got to pick the name very, very well. It has a spirit to it. So the well-briety movement it's the healing emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. It includes mental health, the healing from diabetes and obesities. It's all of those things. All of us coming together, sitting in that same circle, helping, you see, and sharing one another. So what is it we need to do? You can see the damage of many years of trauma inflicted on us as Native people. It's not gone away, by the way. It's still going on in many places. So what is it we need to do? Well, you go back to the teachings. You have honest, dishonest, irresponsible, responsible. There's a polarity system. So if you have historical trauma, then what's the other side? Well, then you have intergenerational healing. So we got to do the opposite now, bringing back these very things that was taken away. The culture, the language, the land, the health, the way of life, rebuild the family structure to get it back to the type of community. This community is not on Google. This is our community. This is the way we were. Come back to the teachings. And they're not all gone, like a lot of people tried to say. They're not gone. But we were taught to think that they're extinct. So how is it when the spirituality was taken away and knocked us out of harmony? Then what is it we do? We create this vision to move us back, that vision of the community. Because one other unfortunate thing the boarding school took away is it took away our ability to dream. We quit dreaming. We quit telling our kids to dream. We quit doing the dreaming ceremonies, the moon ceremonies. There's all those ceremonies that gave us those dreams because that's what we depended upon, see, a long time ago. We have to start dreaming again. Or those dreams are coming to you, you think you're crazy because you're not telling anybody about them because you're being made fun of. You ever notice they won't go away? They'll come back. And they'll come back, and they'll come back. And so we got to pay attention. Isn't that how the Creator talked to us along? We have vision quests. Duh. Why? Because you didn't have a vision. So we had a ceremony or a way that we go out and get it. So we have to start dreaming again. Dream big. Don't dream little. Big ass, big dream. Big dream. But make sure it includes the culture, the ceremonies, the songs. Some of you, you've been dreaming for a long time about those things. So the movement, what is it? Do you think it's possible? Does a possibility exist in the universe to go from this to this?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's very important, that answer. Because you can say, oh yeah, versus uh-uh. Now hang on, because it's going to be quite a trip. It's going to be a journey. So how is it do we do that? How is it we are able to bring our communities back, you see, to this? People like this research center here, this is really cool. Because they're like a bridge, you know, where you can do the Indian thing, and they understand that, and they go over here and they translate what that means, and everybody wins. These centers like this are very, very significant, very important to us because we think different than how they think. Especially when you come back to healing. Because we know, for example, the power of words. Like the elders, they tell us, don't call your youth high-risk youth. But you can get grants for high-risk youth. That's what they call them, high-risk youth. Like, could you imagine being in school and your class ends in the afternoon and your friend says, hey, where are you going? Well, I'm going over to my high-risk youth group. Yeah. Really? Well, yeah. You want to come along? I'm going to go over there. Get a diploma? Oh, yeah, I get a diploma. Most in every language, when I ask, what did you call the children? They called them sacred beings. They had a sacred word that they used for them. We got to not use high-risk youth. Maybe we should call them at promise or something. But not high risk. They're not a risk. When our relatives come back from prisons, we got to quit calling them ex-cons. If you are recovering from alcohol and you got it going, don't call yourself an ex-alcoholic. What the hell is that? Yeah. There's a labeling system that we carry with us. Then pretty soon you're a child of alcoholic. And hell, you don't even drink. Now you pick up the label and you're down. We're really sick. We got to come back and learn how is it we talk to one another. How is it we use those names? Like when our relatives come back from prison, why don't we do a ceremony and give them a new name? Why couldn't we do a naming ceremony and say, here's your new name? Tell everybody, this is who they are. That's not an ex-con. You see, it's like this, that we start to think different. So the 7th generation that we're passing down, this is the cycle that we're trying to break. This is how it's going to look. Can you see it? Bam. If we do the healing, then that's what you start to pass on. And then the children, they are parented by the ones who have gone through the healing. This is very, very possible for us to do it. But you have to do it yourself. You have to be the change you wish to see, that you want to see to have your children to grow up in. Well, the elders gave us 4 laws when we started this. What they said was, if you want to make this work, it's not about theories or hypothesis. They said, we're going to tell you about laws. And the law is like a teeter-totter. If you push one end down, the other end comes up quite consistently. That's like a law. So they said, we're going to start and tell you about the laws, the principles, the teachings. 1991, they gave us 4 laws. Now we have 128 teachings. But they wouldn't give us the rest until, I guess, we were ready. I wish they'd just give me a book of them and turn me loose, but they didn't do that. They said, here's the laws. The first one, they said, changes from within. Change is not from tops down. It's not from outside in. So if you want the community to change, it must change from within itself. If you want your family to change, it's got to change from within itself. If you want you to change, you got to change whether they change or not. You got to change you. That all permanent and lasting change, all permanent and lasting change, all permanent and lasting change, it starts on the inside. Then it works its way out. That's how the Creator made things. The second law is, in order for development to occur, it must be preceded by a vision. No vision, no development. Do you see why? It's like the boarding school. The government said, we'll dream for you. We will vision for you. You don't have to. We'll send the agent down and we're going to tell you what the vision is. Then pretty soon you go into the fort to say, well, he's coming with a vision. I hope the hell he gets here and gives us some food while he's at it, or whatever. But we quit dreaming, you see, we quit visioning. Now there's a principle that goes with every law. Every human being, red, yellow, black, white, don't matter. We move towards and become like that which we think about. Now you move towards and become like that which you think about, whether it's good for you or not. If you're really honest, a lot of times you got in trouble, you was thinking about it first, then you got in trouble. Right? You could be married to somebody, you'd be drinking, and you start thinking about snagging somebody else. And then you go snag somebody else, and you get caught. I was just sitting at the bar, and she just come up here and putting this moves on me. The hell, you was thinking about it first. Guys are pretty good. Now, if it's really true that you move towards to become like that, what you think about, is it important to think about what you're thinking about? Yeah. And what are your tribes thinking about? And what are your agencies thinking about? And what are you thinking about? Well, I can't do that. I'm too old. I can't do that because da da da. If that's what your thoughts are today, that's how it's going to be for you 6 months from now, because there are principles. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so we have to go back, you see, to those types of teachings. That we got to start visioning and thinking about healthy men, healthy families, healthy communities. Because once we get the communities to do that, then that goes in, when you talk about it, it goes inside of you, and that's where the change starts to occur, you see, through that visioning process. So when they knock us out of harmony, then what it is we do the vision to get back in. So every community, every tribe, they call it strategic planning. Now, some of you have been around organizations for a long time, and what they'll do is they'll go up and do a vision statement. That's not what we're talking about. I don't know what the hell a vision statement is. Some of you brag about when some boss comes around. They don't do nothing. We're not talking about that kind of vision. We're talking about vision. About getting the deep stuff, bringing back culture and things. Then the third law is called the Great Learning Law, baby, youth, adult, elder. We analyze youth. They're not respectful no more. That's what's the matter with them. Then you tell, I remember when I was young. Then you tell your story about when you was little and how it was, you know. But what they said is, if you want the youth to be respectful, the adults and the elders have to be all at the same time. If you want the youth to quit drinking, the adults and the elders have to quit. You want the youth not to use prescription drugs, the adults and the elders have to quit. All at the same time. And then to create the healing forest. So this is what this means. Say you have a 100-acre forest, all kinds of trees in there, and let's just say that those trees are sick. So you go one day and you uproot one of those sick trees and you take it down the road to a nursery and you put it where the good soils are, good minerals. Then you watch that tree start to get green and well again. Then maybe one night you're walking past that tree, or the last one, you know, home from work, and there ain't nobody around, and you go hug that tree, pat it on the bark, you know, whisper some good tree self-affirmations or something. Green is worthy, you know, green is good or whatever. But then you take that well tree and you bring it back to a sick forest. What will probably happen to that well tree? You get sick again. Or it could be you take a kid and you put him in treatment. And they're there and they get all those teachings and get that. And they bring it back, come right back to the same community. What happens? They return. They go to prison. You give them all the teachings and they come back. Where do they go? You put them in court or in jail. What do they do? They come right back to the sick forest and they just take on what's there. So what they said, you got to make a healing forest. A forest, you see, that's in healing. At the level of the individual, family, community, and the nation. So, in 7 minutes I'm going to finish this. So hang on. So to start that healing process, we went to the White direction, AA. We got a list of 12 steps. We took those to the elders. And it's kind of interesting because we were, well, this is the white man's program, and I know there's the red road. And we were talking like that. When we got done, they said, that's not a white man's program. They said, that's our program. They said, what those things are is a natural order when you go out of harmony. They said, the only thing we would do is to put those steps in a circle. So we put steps 1, 2, 3 in the east, That's like the new sun. That's where you find yourself, steps 4, 5, 6, the inventory. In the West, that's where you make amends, you set yourself right with your relatives, and then you have the elders' teachings. And when we start to put those in the circle, the Indians started working. Now I get it. I understand what those things are. They're in a circle. There's directions. There's teachings. See how we can share knowledge with one another and it makes sense to both? These are the things you see we have to start doing. Then what we found out was we didn't go only to the professionals, we went to the grassroots. We created a video series, workbooks. We trained the grassroots people on how to run circles. We call them coaches. And it's amazing the power that exists in our communities and in our organizations. You don't have to have a degree to help somebody. Isn't it really one drunk helping another drunk? That's about the best you can get. One woman who healed from domestic violence helping another woman who healed from domestic violence. It's one person helping another person. So then what happens is we show them this and they start to form these circles called circles of recovery. And then pretty soon one of them gets mad. They say, I'll do my own dang group. I ain't hanging around you no more. Before you know it, they got a little circle going. But that's the way nature is. You get a cell, then it divides to get 2 cells. Those 2 divide to get 4. So the change is done small circles at a time. It's not done through a big mass consciousness change. You got to get off your whatever and go start a circle, get it going, and show up every Monday, whether you're just 1 there or 10. Show up. Don't give up, you see, to be one of these coaches. And so they call it peer-to-peer coaching. So we made one for men, and we found out when the men got rid of their anger, guilt, shame, and fear, all of a sudden you started seeing them coming back to the sweat and the culture and learning the songs, and they started learning again, huh? You see that all the time? It's just really cool. Then you see their boys do it. So then pretty soon you see their boys are singing. So this isn't like magic. And then also the same is true for women. When women straighten themselves up, they got their daughters and then they're learning the moon ceremonies and a lot of those old ways, you see, they're coming back. So then we had to take on the issue of the family. So we created a program called the 7 Trainings. And so we just finished one not too long ago. Go to a community, they'll send 100, maybe 125 people. 7 rooms, all you working with men in recovery, room 1. Women in recovery, room 2. Daughters of Traditions, room 3. Room 4. Families, and then pretty soon you've got 125 people. After we leave, they're back there doing the training, starting the circles, you know, for various programs. So you start to see the people in the community are empowered to help themselves. They have the power, you see, to do that. You just got to give them the tools to accomplish that. And we have some books, and I think there's some literature there that we've written on this. But can you see healing this way, that it'll bring back culture? It'll bring back the healing. It starts to make changes. That forest, like we had a long time ago, it starts to come back to us. So I want to close with this in terms of what we need to do. It takes a group of people. We've got to quit waiting for councils to do it. But to form these coalitions of people in various organizations to start working together. And as those groups are the ones that actually help the community build that vision. And then we have a program called Warrior Down, bringing people back out of prison or jail. Boise, Idaho, the first 50 Native men and women who come to Warrior Down, 2 years later, 49 never drank again, and none of the 50 went back to jail.
Wow.
You know what it was? My analysis, one is they come back to a part of the forest that cared.
Yeah.
They cared.
Yeah.
And a second thing is they come back to the culture. When you study culture, our culture, because it learned from nature, it watched the apple tree go all the apples away. So pretty soon we became a giving people. We were a very loveful people. We were loveful people. That's what we were. Our culture is so powerful. You get 1 ounce of culture, it will give you 10 pounds of healing. It's not 1 for 1. That's a, just lick it. If you're screwed, you're going to have to start changing. Just light your medicine in the morning and just pray in the morning, do nothing else. Your life will change. Just do that one thing. Your life changes tremendously. At White Earth, I went up to their Wild Rice Roundup. It's an AA Roundup. They got this little deal they do there. They have a countdown, for those of you who know what AA is. So everybody stand up, and they go, everybody sober 7 days or less, sit down. And everybody applauds. Everybody sober 14 days or less, sit down. More sit down. Then they go, okay, everybody sober 30 days or less, sit down. When I come into recovery, when they would go, everybody sober 30 days or less, sit down, all the Indians would sit down, look at one another, just laugh like hell because we had a hard time getting more than 30 days, you know. But it got up to 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, 31, 32, 33 years. There was no white people standing. There was only Indians standing. We won a freaking countdown. I said to the Creator, if you want to take me now, go ahead, because there's nothing else I've ever had a chance of seeing. It's like the 9th wonder of the world. Indians winning the darn countdown. Who the heck would ever think we would win the countdown? But there are thousands of us sober. We are in critical mass. Not onesies and twosies. We're critical mass now. We have that force. When you look at our website, you'll see now we are mustering a force. We want President Obama to make an apology to the Native people for the government's role in the boarding school. We need your help. Look on the website. There's instructions on it. There's letters to Congress, to the White House. We can make this happen. Got to get our voices together. Got to do it. Got to do it right. So I'm just really pumped because I have a couple of gifts, not many. There's some things that I know for sure, absolutely beyond all shadow of a doubt. I don't know a lot. I know there is a Creator. You never do not change my mind on that. I know that Creator loves us. Yeah. That's true. I know I'm alcoholic. That's really true. And I know that we're in healing. It's happening. It's happening for us. And you see this change happening in Egypt and Libya. And this. I think we're just joining a big consciousness thing. That's what's happening, you see, to us. There's a young person here that has a blue light on their head. That's one of those things I know. Those are one of those young people with old spirits. And I never tell them, but I just sit back and I smile. I think, wow, what a trip. You don't know what she's in for. But then I kind of try to track and try to watch. So we have the ability to heal from this intergenerational trauma. How? The main weapon that we have to do that is going to be forgiveness. Forgiveness is what will cause us to be free. And that's hard. The thing that we've got to do is for... Would you cry and heal and make that pain so your grandbabies don't have to?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I would too. Because that's one thing about us, we love our children. I would do whatever I could to have those grandbabies to be free. And that's what we got to do. We have to do the deal. Us. If it's meant to be, it's up to us to do it. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share this on this stuff on the trauma. And I think we're going to look, is there any questions or or comments or things that anybody has?
Stage changes. Hold on a sec. With time, how about if we take 4 or 5 questions, front, middle, top, and then we'll see how we're doing with time. You guys all right staying a little bit later?
You should have came like for a week at a time.
You have to use the mic now for this.
Hi, my name is Layla Yamabe. I live in Yuba Valley and I take some classes at the Muckle Street Reservation. And I was actually talking to people about sharing our information with other people because a lot of tribes don't like to share anything, and a lot of elders don't like to share their information. And I feel like that's part of the problem that we're having, and I want to know how we can get them to share.
When the assault came, they saw they was taking the land, they saw they were taking things. A long time ago, whoever came to our camp, they come to the ceremonies, it was just included. There was no secrets. But when the assault came, most of the communities, they took the ceremonies underground because they knew that was what would get us through the testing time. And I think we're just now seeing, even in 1991, they wouldn't even let us write stuff. There are certain things you could not write down, even in our own. Now they say tell it all. So I think a part of the healing is to form those circles and start to share. The talking circles, the healing circles, the grief work. Many of our elders are wounded. You have elders, you have old people. And there's a difference. And many of those who are old, who in age, are old people, when you hear what happened to them and they had no place to go, if you get raped or something, you got a place to go. You may not go, but you got a place to go. They did not. They just had to carry it. We did a healing thing for elders in Minnesota. In Minneapolis, we thought maybe 30, 40 would come. 200 showed up for healing. But we need them to share. We really need to know, in the next 15 years, the elder systems, we know it's going to be gone. They're dropping like flies. So you got to spend time with them. We've got to get that knowledge as much as we can from them.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Cannell, and I live over on the other side of the water. And I know that you're talking a lot about forgiveness, and I'm wondering what your